Hey, it's Soul with some more 9.1 PTR coverage. Just the other day, an interview between game director Ian Hazzikostas and the Chinese community over at Radar.io surfaced, kind of like an answer to me talking smack about him and the Blizzard team not being very forward with communicating to its players, so that's kind of a, well, I guess I get to eat crow. You can watch it yourself by clicking the link in the description below, but keep in mind that Ian's talky stuff is being dubbed over. So here I'm going to cover the good parts, the takeaways that we can further commentate on and discuss. And don't forget there's going to be a live discussion with Ian on Preach Gaming's Twitch channel Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific. I'm super looking forward to that, so well, we'll stay tuned for that. For now though, we're going to use the Wowhead article that featured this interview and take a look at this thing that happened apparently a week ago. It was done before the 9.1 PTR released. We start with when. When is 9.1 going to release, and I guess more importantly, will it conflict with the Burning Crusade Classic release, as both are currently in testing phases? Ian says, well, obviously we will have more information to announce about specific dates for Burning Crusade Classic and for Chains of Domination. I can tell you that it's very unlikely that we're going to release both of these right at the same time. We know there are many players who would like to experience both. They're very different projects in terms of their testing needs, and we need to begin the PTR or the beta at the appropriate time to give teams working on those games all the time and all the feedback they need to ensure a good outcome. So while we want to avoid too much collision between the two, we also understand that there are many players who only play Classic, and there are many players who only play Shadowlands, and we don't want to punish one group in order to avoid a conflict for the other, while still trying to make sure that each game has some time and space to breathe on its own. In light of this, the question is, which is going to come out first, Burning Crusade Classic or patch 9.1? Now, I'm a fan of the idea of waiting a little bit longer for 9.1. I think that it would hurt a little bit less to come out later than for it to release first at the risk of it being premature. But I'm a little bit mixed. Like, we're well into the longest gap between the start of an expansion and a major content release. Even considering like every possible excuse, waiting longer sucks. It means lost goodwill. But I suppose it's also a matter of perspective. People who have never tried it can try out Burning Crusade in the meantime, and they can get their jollies. Someone like me is not. I'm just gonna be bumming around developing alts in Shadowlands and farming anima. But I'm also not so sure how much breathing room is appropriate, because we're comparing an expansion to a patch. Burning Crusade requires a pretty big investment to get a character up and attuned and, hitting expertise capped and defense capped and all that jazz. Today's WoW doesn't require nearly the same dedication, but the allure of new content and fear of missing out and a hard early investment does tend to pay off in the long run. But how much time between both works best? Like 2 or 3 weeks? A month? What do you think? The interview also went into catch-ups from the various systems in Shadowlands, from Renown to Legendaries. The interview asked about being able to disenchant Legendaries, and here was Ian's answer. That's an interesting question. We don't have any current plans along those lines right now, but it's something that we can look at, providing some way of either changing your secondary stats or getting a partial refund. The thing we'd want to be careful to avoid is a world where it feels too easy to make one legendary for one situation, then disenchant or change it into a different one to go, and you don't really feel like you ever need to build a collection. But I agree that making a mistake there feels like it could be frustrating, and we should do more. To be fair, I have a feeling that a bit of the translation to Ian was lost there, as I don't think anyone's really asking for a full refund on the investment into Legendaries. But going by Ian's statement, yes, I do agree that putting in the work to make one max level Legendary, and then being able to manipulate that Legendary into like anything you want, whenever you want, isn't very good. I really do like the idea of being able to change secondary stats with some sort of additional cost. I'm not sure if I would want that cost to be soul ash, but now that we know that there are going to be a maximum of 12 layers in Torghast, it's going to be really important to know how much ash we can earn in a week after 9.1 launches. I do feel like disenchanting legendaries for a partial refund will be necessary though, especially as we get into the new gear coming from Sanctum of Domination and Tazavesh, some of which seem to have some pretty cool special effects. This will mean that many of us are going to be rethinking if that 235 helmet should be 235 legs instead. I have to admit that I disagree with the interviewer that Shadowlands is not alt-friendly. Of course, many of you probably disagree with me too, but let's go with Ian's response first. He says, yes, Chains of Domination will definitely add a lot of catch-up mechanisms, both for alts, but also for returning players, for new players who are joining Shadowlands and hitting a level 60 for the first time. It's going to be much more important for you to be able to get into the new content, to get a legendary without having to wait weeks for it, so that you can play with your friends and experience what everyone else is doing, so that will benefit both new and returning players and alts. This is a pretty broad claim that so far isn't being reflected in the current PTR. Right now it's very chill for characters who are Renown 40 right now, but for alts and fresh players, while they can access the start of 9.1 content after completing Chapter 2 of the original Covenant campaign, accessing Chapter 2 of the 9.1 campaign requires a Renown level of 44. That's really rough. But imagine in Burning Crusade Classic, if you're being told to switch to a different class instead, that's not a lot of fun either. So what might we see in 9.1 Shadowlands? I can definitely see a instant Renown catch up to 40 when players complete the 9.1 introduction. That covers most of the bases, because from there a player can progress into the 9.1 campaign, or they can go back and complete the Covenant campaign, the original Covenant campaign, for some easy gear, and they can access the whole thing in one sitting. I already mentioned that a layer 12 Torghast might drop a lot more Soul Ash than before, and there's a good chance that there will be an overall Soul Ash increase, so it's easier to make a decent legendary considering the more current item levels. Some of these catch-ups are baked into the PTR already. There's already more anima that drops from content, with boosts baked into Renown level. Shortly into the 9.1 campaign, the Eye of the Jailer is going to be disabled, making Stygia farming just a matter of, well, farming when you want to instead of the daily chore. But now let's cover Mythic Plus, fitting because the interviewer is a name in the Raider.io community. One highlight to point out includes the team's intention to make it easier to find and make the kind of group that you want to make, specifically if you want to, quote, just complete the dungeon, or whether you want to push the key higher. I think this is huge when it comes to setting and managing expectations. Now, I totally get it. Obviously, this can be done elsewhere, such as the description of the key and talking to your fellow party members to make sure that everyone is on the same page. This little additive takes it a step further, and it makes it much easier at a glance to look at a series of lobbies knowing that the intention is to just clear and not time. And it reassures players who want to host their key for just completion there is no ambiguity. One very curious takeaway is the idea of the Mythic Plus score separating Tyrannical and Fortified into separate scores. Okay, by curious, maybe I mean punishing, but let me describe how I think this is going to work. Let's pretend that your score is totally fresh for the season, and you clear Necrotic Wake for the first time, and it's on a 10. Using pretend numbers, this will add 500 to your score, where 100 points of that score happen to count for you clearing it on Fortified. So next week you do the exact same thing, only this time the other affix is Tyrannical. Your score doesn't increase because it's the same dungeon, difficulty, and clear time, but now you get another 100 points because you happen to clear it on Tyrannical. Now I would think that's cool, but I'm closer to the mindset of some of you that maybe Fortified and Tyrannical should just go away. I can't give the most elegant input here, but while they do a lot to change the variety of Keystone difficulty, it's also discouraging seeing how a certain fix combo and dungeon can make a key feel more or less dead. Maybe I should get good, right? But right now I feel a little butthurt, and I don't see Tyrannical and Fortified going anywhere, at least in Season 2. The takeaway that perked me right up, though, is that the score, the Mythic Plus score, may be tied to the Valor upgrade requirements as opposed to achievements, as they are right now. Ian said that we also want to tie this into things like the requirements or achievements like Keystone Master or Keystone Conqueror. Instead of just being do all dungeons at a plus 10 or do all dungeons at a plus 15, it could be more just get your score or rating to 2200, kind of like how it is in PvP. This probably means you still have to be pretty good in order to unlock the highest available Valor upgrades or get that Keystone Conqueror achievement, but the requirements are just a lot more flexible than before. I can't see this as being bad at all, at least not until we see how high these point requirements are. That's going to be it for my highlights, but again, I invite you to take a look at the Wowhead article that covers the entire interview as well as the interview itself. Links to those are in the description below, and also again, in a few days, Ian is going to be hanging out with Preach on his Twitch channel discussing / defending what's to come in patch 9.1, and you can count on my coverage of that as well. I want to thank you very, very much for watching, and I hope that you could show some love by liking the video and subscribing for more of this and all things Warcraft. We'll see you next time, and until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.